Minden video. So I have posted a physics video on the physics channel as a reply to Pyrrho, covering all the two-slit stuff, why the contradictions between the single slit, the double slit, my explanation of a perfectly viable explanation for the material explanation for the function, responding to Pyrrho's critiques, blah 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 blah. And so I'll do the general stuff here about Pyrrho's video in this video, but the video on the details is on the, I'll leave a link below to the DraftScience channel, an hour's worth. It's good stuff. Anyway, conference report. Yeah, wow. So it looks like the Mystic from a distance. Except he's got the, peasant hat. Mystic didn't wear peasant hats too often. But anyway, so it was nice seeing him. But he basically was saying, fuck you, I'm not going to do any more videos probably. But anyway, we'll see. I think it's, as much as it gets ugly and it's difficult to, maintain a conversation about anything really in life, the deeper you get into stuff, this is why people get divorced, right? They have to live with each other and then they start pissing each other off with their bullshit, I would imagine. Not that I live with people too often. But it is a little difficult, and especially when the people, there's people who just, they are thinkers, and, they start thinking about stuff, and stuff starts adding up, and stuff ends up in a, lines just seem so straight and so obvious that, it's kind of insufferable to put up with people who are still living in the flat earth. Once you know the earth is round, it gets really frustrating to talk to the flat earthers. And I suppose that's something that happens between atheists and religion, a lot of subjects, just because it just becomes, it's almost like talking to little kids or something. It lacks depth and integrity. And it just seems silly to have conversations that aren't accounting for what you see as just obvious features of existence. And so it's just regrettable, that's all. I like conference support generally speaking, but yeah, we have some divergences in our perceptions of reality that are just so huge that they create a block in our ability to communicate in a properly friendly manner. But anyway, so we brought up the subject of theory. Theory on theory, a nice way to title the video, I thought. I've sort of been building to a perception of how to argue. What we're really arguing is models. It's all to do again with the fact that your brain is modeling reality. We don't really live in reality. We live in our brain's model of reality. And that model is really what a theory is. It's a description of a function, because it's not, in my opinion, it's the only definition that really works, because it covers things like evolution and a theory that doesn't contain any geometry, doesn't contain a whole lot of, there's not much math in it. And then something like physics, where there's a lot of math, can be, but there can also be very descriptive images. Where you don't need the math because of the image of the explosion, the nuclear bombs, mushroom cloud or something. It's not a mathematical in terms of the model of a demonstration of the wave, for example, of something in the medium. The wave is just so visual. You don't need the math to see the pattern. And so I think model is a much better word for what a theory is. It's a model of what happens, or what happened, or how it happens. And you could even use that to describe the theory presented in a legal confrontation. You're basically presenting a theory of how fairness is derived, or what justice is, or who did it. A theory, a reconstruction of the reality. And it's basically a model, and models are often used in court trials. They'll even do demonstrations, but often they're just so horribly wrong. So I always go back to the OJ trial, because I watched it, and there was this whole bit where they wanted to use up 20 minutes of time, because they needed to They had to make up this crap of where, you know, they had to use up some more time. And, you know, because they had to try to make it impossible for OJ to have done it because it took so long. And so they made the Goldman murder, they made it into this 15-minute battle. So here's a guy that's outweighed by 100 pounds and like 6 inches. He doesn't have a knife. The guy attacking him has a knife. And they made it into a 15-minute fight. And, you know, your brain is saying, if anybody who's been in a fight, fights last seconds. I mean, you know, it's really, you know, the first punch landed is the winner often. Or, you know, first aggression is either automatically defeated in the sense that the aggression is tripped and your face hits the asphalt, or else your aggression wins and you got the guy on the defensive, and once you have him on the defensive, you beat the shit out of him. I mean, fights happen fast, incredibly fast. You know, milliseconds fast. They're not boxing matches. You know, people don't have pillows on their fists, and you don't have to like beat him, you know, down in an endurance fight. And it was just so, you know, to see a scientist, you know, scientists talking about how this fight could have gone on for 15 minutes. And I kept screaming at the TV, just do silence for 5 minutes. Force the jury to sit there in silence for 5 minutes just to feel how long that is. And to think about these two guys fighting for that much time and realize how no fucking way did any of that shit happen. This guy was dead in less than 60 seconds. It was just such a crock of shit. Anyway, but that's what we're talking about here, is theories that are just a crock of shit. So that's part of what I want to get to. But I just want to get to the idea of replacing the word theory with the idea of model. You know, just use that as the equal sign. Just say, let's just forget the word theory and just say, here's a model. Now, it's either a model based on a lot of evidence, it's a model that's hard to defeat because it makes so much sense. I mean, all the pieces work. You know, it's a model like a steam engine. I can make a little steam engine. Well, it's really a little steam engine, so that's not a good example. But there's many things you could model, you know, in small scale, a little boat or something. And you can imagine building it out of the real materials and make it work. Like sometimes that doesn't work because physics doesn't work that way, but I'm just saying models are often a very good way to demonstrate. And certainly models can also be conceptual, and then these theories can be explained and they can be diagrammed. You can draw it, which I often do. So anyway, I think it's a good way of understanding theory. All right, so I guess that's all to say. The conference where he wasn't really saying much on it, except that, yeah, I don't know if there was, I didn't see the original video he was commenting on, but I guess he didn't say anything that I thought was outlandish. I just think it's a safer way to understand, and I would argue that some models are vacuous, you know, in the sense that I can always make the invisible man theory or the God theory, right? I mean, they're parallels in a sense. They're completely unsupported by any evidence, but if I make up a super character with superpowers, I can make it do lots of things that will duplicate the evidence. That'll perform the way I want it to perform because I gave it the superpowers. I gave it powers to do all kinds of magical things. And so it can solve a problem, but it's not really solving it. All right, anyway, and then I would also point out that the mathematical models, although they're very explicit, you know, they come up with hard results most of the time, they're easily can have errors in them. They can easily be exaggerations or approximations, or they're not really detailing. They don't have enough detail, enough variables in them. They're not accounting for everything, or they're accounting for it in a, you know, right answer for the wrong reason, you know, kind of a thing. So anyway, all right, so on to Pyrrho in a general sense. So he's made these videos, you know, he titled them with the word liar in there, and like I said, I think he is the liar, and I think I've proven the lies. He keeps saying things I've never said, as quoting me, and he keeps arguing as if he has provided something called evidence. He's provided nothing. Yeah, you know, it's just horrible for him to call me to accuse me of lying about his position when his position is full of fluff and mush. And I could certainly go back through our conversations and find plenty of time. You know, he's arguing things like, I never say love. Well, yes, you have plenty of times. And you've certainly said the word spirituality, which might as well be the same thing. If that's not pantheism, I don't know what it is. Anyway, so he started talking about this non-locality stuff and, you know, these words that I'm supposed to be using. And I've already demonstrated in the previous video that these words have silly definitions and inconsistent definitions. And just using them is essentially conceding an argument. For me to even concede the reason for me to even have to argue something like, oh yes, I'm a physical material being and I live in a physical universe where there's limitations to the speed of transfer of information and actual forces have to move between things. They can't communicate with any special powers or superpowers or invisible powers. Well, they can be invisible to our eyesight, but I mean non-accountable energy forces. I shouldn't have to preface my argument with a declaration that I'm talking about a real world, not the fake world they're talking about. But anyway, so why would I use his language? It doesn't serve any purpose in my world. But I've already made the argument. Anyway, physics is suspect. So he said. So then he argued that you know, he keeps pointing out that somehow, because he took a few classes, a few physics courses, that somehow he has a knowledge base that's sufficient for him to be arrogant and obnoxious. And I don't think that holds up in the sense that I can demonstrate that I have watched, you know, 2 full courses, 801, 802, well, 803 at MIT, which would account for probably 150 lectures, and all the Yale lectures, and a bunch of the Stanford lectures. So, I mean, if you add those up, you know, like obviously I wasn't tested on the material. Obviously I didn't pay too much attention to all the mathematics. But the point is, I've watched some of those lectures many times, and I've certainly watched the Feynman lectures dozens of times. Because you hear something new each time. So then he says math isn't like that, because I said to him that, look, the math is not going to be that much different. It's going to be using the same variables, the same relationships are going to exist in the sense of something's going to be multiplied and divided and all that kind of stuff based on proportional relationships. So yes, there's going to be some sine theta stuff, and there's going to be some proportional relationships to what percentage of a circle you're covering and what part of the dimension you're covering or some other kind of thing. So all that stuff's going to be in there, but the modifications aren't going to be huge. Just like Einstein's modifications to Newton were not according to the model. It wasn't a huge difference. Mathematically, it became a huge difference because there's so much feedback information between the two bodies. I mean, when you count for both of them moving, then it gets really complicated, because then you have to add this movement to this movement and this movement to this movement, and you have to do it through time intervals. So then you end up with these. That's where you get into tensors and what's the other stuff? I mean, it's all this stuff where you have to approximate quantas of time to even be able to do the math, and the math is still going to be an approximation of the effects. But as a model, me pointing out that the sun's doing this while the earth is going around is not a huge difference from Newton's the sun's staying still as the earth goes around. It's not a huge difference in terms of the look of the model. A little bit of vibration here, but it makes a difference when you talk about the precession of Mercury. That movement of the sun is very important in terms of its effect on things close to the sun. All right. So math isn't the be-all, end-all, and very small changes in math can represent huge changes in the model, or vice versa. Huge changes in the model can be represented by tiny changes in the math. I might have said that the same way, but I meant to say it 2 different ways, but you can figure that out. Yeah, okay. All right, force of electrons, I think I wrote here, or bounce of electrons, or something of electrons. What would that be? But anyway, the point will be is that the only thing that's going to change in my math is that my model uses electrons instead of sine theta. Okay, it'll be the movement of the electrons in a force field, the field energy of the universe around matter. That field energy is what's deciding where the electron moves and where the new photon is emitted, and that's going to replace sine theta. So that's going to be one difference in the math. Plenty of mathematical explanations for the 2-slit experiment. Well, see, that's the whole problem. First off, they're not accurate in the sense that they're vague approximations of the outcome. And if you were explicit about it, if you actually look at the outcome and then look at what the math says happens, they won't be the same in both the single slit and the double slit. Well, the single slit's more reliable just because they do use Huygens to make it more reliable. That's the point I want to make. It's still not going to. It still isn't going to get. It isn't going to get right the infinite part. There is no infinite pattern, and this is another part of the experiment that could be done right now. Is when they have the slit the narrowest and there's the fewest photons going through it. They should be using photographic plates to collect photons over time, so they can actually see if there's any photons going at the very acute angles and collect them. And I don't think anybody's bothered to do this, but that would explain whether the pattern is as the math says. The math says the pattern goes forever, theoretically. Is that true? What the hell was that? Oh, it doesn't matter. Alright, so this is, let's see, okay, the space between electrons. So again, that's the pressure of the electrons is what I'm offering as an explanation, and that's on the DraftScience thing, so I don't think I'll go through all that again. Well, obviously I won't go through it all, but I don't think I need to preface it with much, except that there's 5 minutes of Pyrrho's video that I respond to where he's talking about the 2-slit experiment, and again doing it in this very general way, no drawings, no explanations beyond, you know, hand waving, and it's probably not really enough to, if he wants to demonstrate he has a viable explanation. And again, he's not even picking one of these interpretations. He's just explaining that, well, we have a whole bunch of different Invisible Man. Invisible Man Bob, if Invisible Man Bob is pushing the photon, and then there's Invisible Man Jim who's moving the photon, and you know, they're just these different explanations that all involve invisible forces creating invisible effects. I mean, the effect. Okay, so yeah, so I'm kind of at the idea of calling these people physics truthers is appealing to me because they seem to have the same kind of lack of respect. Okay, for you can make the argument and explain to them how, well, what they're saying is impossible is not impossible. It's quite possible that matter is creating the effect, and they just ignore that. They don't create any debunking. They don't make any effort whatsoever to make a counter-argument demonstrating how your theory can't possibly be true. They'll just keep saying it can't possibly be true because they don't want it to be possibly true. Alright. So same math, the same variables, slight refinement. Okay, so that's good enough. Let me get to any from your system. Any? Oh yeah, well, we're not going to get any math from your system. Now I've repeatedly used the existing math, the inverse square law, for example, Maxwell's equations, for example. I said these are all pretty solid elements describing relationships. Again, math is a model that there's no quantum factor in 2-slit math. There's no such thing as the quantum symbol. There's just wavelength and the distance from the target and the width of the slits. They're just the common variables. There's no magic variable. And Huygens is just the number 2. in the math. That's all it is. Forces you to, it allows you to create two sine thetas, two photons. That's all. That's how it's represented in the math. It's just adding the number 2. Here it is, this complex theory model. As a mechanical model, it's very complex, and in the math it's represented by the number 2. So there's no magic here in terms of the mathematics. And certainly in the two-slit math, there's no evidence of anything. There's no quantum factor. Okay, that's their interpretation of the effect. It's not in the math. There's no quantum in the math. All right, but again, like I said, the math doesn't really explain the phenomenon. So that's part of the problem, is they keep claiming the math is perfect, and it's far from perfect. All right, so I'll play some of this, I guess, and then we'll finish up. I mean, there's hours of this crap I have to go through, so I don't know how much of it I'm going to actually listen to, or how much of it I'm going to say, fuck you. You know, because it's just this machine gun bullshit. I'm just going to mention, he'll probably say wormhole in here, or probably go into the tunneling microscope, or go into 4,000 different concepts. And, you know, again, it's my obligation not only to debunk the foundational experiments, but I have to debunk every experiment known to mankind, and I'm really not going to do that. It's really his job to point out how I'm wrong in this position, as far as I'm concerned, not my job to prove all of physics to be a misinterpretation of the experimental results.
It's a pilot wave, which I know you don't say that, but then you have this problem with realism. You want to say, I'm going to be real analytical, and I'll just fuck around on saying math is going to work out. Math.
Well, again, I was just saying, I don't have to say it. The math already does work out. There's no quantum factor in the math. So again, until you show me a quantum in the math, Einstein's field equations don't have any magic in them. There's not even a relativity factor. There's no such thing.
It's going to back me up. How's that going to work? You got an equation? Who needs an equation? I got an authority. Gary and Mendenhall.
Well, again, I have a model. What you don't have is a model. You have a pile of mush. Okay, a claim that a photon has magical, it's creating waves in front of it, linear flat waves, you know, that that can spread any gap and create interference, you know, to some extent.
Yeah. All right. So having said that, let's see what Misty pyrrho314 is all about. I'm sure it'll be just a joy to watch.
Yeah, well, as I've already pointed out, there's been no joy in any of my interactions with you. It's just this tedious process of pointing out how you evidence none of your arguments. You're just an arrogant, pontificating propagandist. And yeah, it's really annoying to listen to one, and it's even more annoying to have to argue with one because they don't respond coherently or rationally to a single point you make.
So this whole disagreement is basically because you know, I see a certain expedience in getting to a more direct conversation about direct evidence, and he wants to have a conversation in a general sense using vague terminology for vaguely describe concepts like wormholing or you know, he keeps bringing up tunneling microscopes, different things, and these things aren't proven in anything. What he's claiming is taking place.
See, I don't recall bringing up tunneling microscopes all the time.
Okay, well, I'm just saying, you know, get the testimony from somebody else in the live rooms, back all the way back to Stickcam. Tunneling microscope. I mean, you must have referenced it at least 50 times, at least 50. And I'm sincerely saying the number.
But I could, because they exist and they're physical. A guy had a theory. He said, hey, quantum mechanics means this should be possible. And he tried.
There's nothing possible about it. Again, see, the whole thing, again, you're saying something must be possible. It's merely a mathematical. It's like Google's algorithm. Applying a good algorithm can take the noise out of an image. We all know that. You can if you spend enough time analyzing a video, a certain individual video, you can put it through a number of different algorithms and clean all the noise out of it, and you can make the video much cleaner. Okay, and that's all a tunneling microscope is doing. It's creating a synthetic, cleaner image. That's it. It's a synthetic thing. It's not a real microscope anymore. It's just software that improves the images of an electron microscope.
And it worked, unlike anything in your theory. So that's pretty impressive. You want to trash it? I wonder why that could be. Is it because it works or because it doesn't work? Well, since it does work...
Well, again, work is, you say you have a picture of an atom surface, and there's no evidence that that is a picture. I don't have a real picture of the atom to compare to your artificial image. So, yeah, I can't really prove it's not an image of an actual atom. That's right.
I guess it's not because it doesn't work. Follow that logic there?
There's nothing to follow. I'm just saying the presumptions built into what you're saying it's doing are your assumptions. Your model of how it's working is different than how it's working.
And remember, not everything is a theory and an assertion. Some things are terms we use to discuss theories and assertions.
And that would be my argument, that the terms you use are always aggrandized and exaggerated. The very idea of saying tunneling microscope, as if there was such a thing as actual tunneling, whether this had anything to do with doing any kind of tunneling or any kind of crap like that. The very idea that because in a medium you can move some places, you can move an electron, in the sense that electrons will convey force at a very high speed, because they're really just the photon goes in, the photon goes out, and so the effect can be as the electron appears to be moving very fast. But in some cases, because photons are moving through a medium in a non-straight line, you could go faster with an electron moving straight. A force from an electron to another electron can move faster because it's going to move in a straight line rather than the crooked line that the light is bending through, not bending through, but bouncing through.
What the thing itself is actually doing, and that's the problem of using these elements of infrastructure as if they're established elements of physics when they're not. They're what they claim to be in name only, not in actual proven function.
So, tunneling microscopes are, in fact, used. They take images. You can get very good images of not every kind of object.
They don't take images. So again, they don't take images. They make images. It's a big difference.
Object, but metallic objects, for example. So you can see the...
Now let's understand how an electron microscope works. An electron microscope doesn't really take a picture of something. What it does is it coats something with a conductor. It shoots a bunch of silver atoms onto the surface, and then it bounces electrons, it bounces energy into the metallic surface and creates electrons coming out of the metallic surface. So it energizes the metallic surface shoots back electrons, and it takes a picture of the electrons that shoot back. Or maybe it's the photons that come off the electrons. I'm sorry, maybe I've said that wrong.
Molecules in the metallic object, and they use that in industrial processes now because it's like 20 years old technology.
Well, again, and the tunneling part is it's really just a way of enhancing the quality of the images through algorithms.
So God only knows what your standard is of working. You have no working thing.
Well, again, I don't need to make something that works in some kind of way. It's a model where you have the wrong model, and I'm going to give you the right model. Okay, the right description of the mechanical function, and that might not have an immediate, right at the moment, improvement in something, but over time it's certainly going to, you know, if airplane lift isn't what you think it is, or if something else isn't what you think it is, and now you get a better explanation of what it is, then yes, you're probably going to be able to exploit it.
Offer just your criticism in your own personal authority.
Well, again, that's not what I'm offering. What I'm offering is a detailed explanation, and an explanation that ties the known facts together. Known facts like the force of magnetism, the force of gravity, and the force of the electromagnetic spectrum, that is photons, all travel at the same speed. A meaningful correlation.
Yourself to be playing stupid.
The very fact that you would do a serious game and the rest of you were the very fact that you did like serious or silly or stupid just points out my exact argument.
No, that's not. I wasn't saying that it was silly or stupid. You're silly or stupid to think that everything you do is so serious. It's not.
Whatever that means.
And you want to pick out one joke where I'm trying to be friendly and say, see, you're glib. And
yeah, it's already an argument that I'm sick of hearing, is that somehow you are, number one, that you have done anything but be an obnoxious waste of my time rather than an asset to me moving my ideas forward. So in no way have you been in any way an ally or a help. And all you've been is an annoying impediment.
you're fucking talking to Brett Keane. That seems pretty glib. I don't think you're saying that that's absolutely the best thing in the world. You could...
Well, I already answered this in the video, so this is going to be a bit of a waste of time. Sorry.
Do right now. You've made a rational decision about the very best thing you could do for the whole world, and it's talk to Brett Keane.
Again, I wasn't talking to Brett Keane. I was answering questions posed by Brett Keane, and the questions were a hell of a lot more interesting than the fucking accusations I get from you.
The world isn't so bad. The crimes committed against the sentient organisms are so horrific.
And Great Tex tried to call me on this, or did call me on it, but there's a misunderstanding. I'm not saying you shouldn't talk to Brett Keane. I'm saying you shouldn't pretend that all you do is useful things.
Even me having this conversation is an insult to their pain. That's how bad.
I don't know where that came up. Where did this come up that I'm making the claim that everything I do perfectly? Never have I made any such claim. I'm constantly unhappy with some of my performance. I'm constantly seeking better performance. I'm constantly seeking better people to talk to, as if they might pull out of me higher performance. So where is this argument that I think everything's going just fine? I think everything's working just fine. Where have I made that argument, you fucking cunt? So again, another misparaphrase.
It's grotesque.
Oh, well, there you go. Yeah. So you're grotesque.
And yes, so you people are, it's already bad enough that I'm not a terrorist.
So I mean, he's playing the video fast, so he can't even hear what I'm saying. And again, just somehow he came up with somehow I just said I was grotesque. No.
I mean, I've already not done my job in a sense because it's that bad. So yeah, your glibness is insanely glib. Yes.
Well, who has time to be a terrorist when you're chit-chatting with Brett Keane?
So again, he just misses the point, right? The argument is that the bad is so bad that I'm already, because I'm not willing to go as far as I should, that I'm already failing to appreciate the urgency of the harm, the depth of the catastrophe, the weight of the Jews in the concentration camp, so to speak. We're all Americans just sitting here eating our dinner, and we're not really paying any attention to what's happening, kind of a thing. And you're even a million times more detached. So, yeah, missed the point entirely.
I think it's glib to do things like call me a pantheist.
Right. So he thinks that's taking his philosophy too far. So if I survey the majority of college rec,
Uh-oh.
which do you think you're going to say? College rec.
There you go. Leave it there. You're at the right spot. Leave it there.
Well, this isn't good.
Why didn't you just leave it where it
Am I
was?
having internet problems?
No, I was doing the same thing to me, too.
Try to reload it. Let's check that out. 259 in case.
Yeah, sometimes they don't start
majority
right.
of college graduates, let's just say, with science degrees. And I asked them, do you think electrons are conscious? What percentage do you think are going to say yeah? Do you think consciousness exists outside of brains? And what percentage do you think are going to say yes?
See, the smart thing to do is use the keyboard, use the space key. I gotta remember to do that myself, and you don't end up fucking things up. Get your hands off the mouse. Just use the space bar. So yeah, I'm making the argument that, look, and he does use the word spirituality, and he has this redefinition of it as whatever, but I'm just saying it is just mysticism. It's voodoo, it's religion. It goes way beyond what the physics indicates. Well, the problem with the space bar is when you click on something else, you fuck it up. You hit the wrong key.
Oh, wow, that actually is just an appeal to authority when it's convenient for you. What are they going to say? What do you think they're going to say about quantum mechanics?
It's not an appeal to authority. It's just recognizing the fact that, the smarter you were, the less likely you were to vote for Donald Trump. That's just a fact. And the fact is that smart people, okay, who have degrees and shit, aren't going to buy this argument that consciousness is floating around some kind of ether, just falling into glasses and wherever, people are drinking consciousness or something.
This is bullshit, and your theory of tons is the way to go. What percentage do you think, Gary?
They haven't heard that theory yet, so they can't really judge it until they hear it, and it's certainly a more complex theoretical statement. So if I ask them, do you think it's possible to find another explanation for quantum effects that might have something to do with a material explanation? I'm pretty sure a lot of them say, yeah, I think that's probably possible because all this bent space bullshit sounds like crap.
I would wager not many. Not a big number. That wouldn't make me a pantheist either. And it's also not, of course, what I have proposed. I don't think electrons are conscious. I believe parameciums are conscious.
Right, you believe things without neurons are conscious, which is the same difference. We have nothing in common with a paramecium. I've made this argument so many times, he's never paid any attention to it. But it's the difference between a brick and the Empire State Building. They're not anything really alike. Technically, you could make the Empire State Building out of some other substance. You don't need to make it out of bricks or stones or, well, I'll use the Washington Monument. They're not the same thing. The thing made out of the bricks is not the same as the thing made out of it. The steel is different than the car. We're fundamentally a different kind of machine than the cells that make us up. The cells that make us up are entirely different than the community. Just like the people are incredibly different than the city. The city is not anything like the people.
Maybe you could, look up the difference of a fucking electron and a paramecium. Okay?
It wouldn't matter. I'm just saying the distance between us and a paramecium fundamentally is just the same. We might as well be made out of electrons, or we might as well be made out of parameciums, or might as well be made out of anything, because it doesn't really matter what you pick. The difference between how they function and how we function is enormous. The difference between a beanbag chair and the beans, the styrofoam BBs inside of it, is just intrinsically and fundamentally, they're not the same thing. They're structurally different.
Besides the 4 billion years of evolution since paramecium seem to have been born, there's a lot of other obvious differences.
There's absolutely no evidence anywhere in the known universe of consciousness existing in something that doesn't have neural arrangement. There's just no evidence of a finger or anything being conscious. None. Zero. No evidence.
For one, parameciums have a lot of electrons in them. They're much bigger than an electron. The closest thing I've ever said to the lie you just told is that
You've said it goes all the way down. You said reductionism allows you to tear it down, to make it go further down. I'm just saying you've already put it into something that can't possibly. Bricks aren't buildings. They're not buildings. They're bricks. They're not heating systems. They're not floors. They're not walls. They're not all that stuff. They're bricks. Bricks are different.
It's hard to switch here to the lie you just told, is that consciousness has to be a result of laws of physics. And in that sense, it's out there, just like magnet.
No, neural activity is the result of physics, the electricity and the chemicals. The illusion of consciousness is not a material thing. It's made of material things. Just like we aren't cells, we're made of cells. It's that kind of difference. The consciousness is as different from the matter it's made of as we are different from the cells we're made out of.
Magnetism is out there. And as it happens, all rocks are made of atoms that are magnetic. But not all rocks are those little tiny magnets that the atoms and molecules aligned so that it adds up to something we can see at our scale. When you have an iron magnet, you got the billions of little tiny iron atoms all aligned the same way.
Well, they're made out of neodymium now, so it's a little different. They're strong.